Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
I actually watched 2 episodes today to get kind of caught up. And Rabbi Schatz and I were talking a little bit earlier about how there may not be quite as many halakhic issues to discuss in episode 9. But, Judaism is not only about halakha, it's about, if you will, musar. It's about the morality and the ethics and how we treat other people, how we approach other people, and even judging them. And, one of the issues that I found really interesting that really connected between 8 and 9 is my cat is walking in. So my very talkative cat, Shubi. I can't pick up because otherwise, right? No. So if you hear meowing, that's Shubi right here. Okay. But I related to it very much, though, was as a Reform rabbi, is this idea of life without limits, the secular life. And some of you might remember the speaker who came in to talk to the girls' yeshiva, and she was talking about her life, and it was all, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and just partying, and, and all these things. And Hodaya's like listening to this, and she interrupted, and she's like, well, wasn't there anything positive about the secular life? And it was just kind of like the secular life, you could do anything you want. And I know as a Reform rabbi, I am constantly, and really as recently as the night before I left, which I believe would be Monday night, having this discussion on a moshav named Tal Shachar near Latrun with someone. And in Israel, Reform Judaism, or Yahadut Mitkademet, is really, to many people, presented as basically Christianity. They're not Jews at all. And many American Jews, Reform Judaism is basically, well, you don't have to do anything, or you can do whatever you want. There are no limits. And I think one of the questions that I wanted to bring up with you, and we can deal with this from a religious perspective and as well as other perspectives, is can there be value? Can we admit that there is value in philosophies which are not ours? But do we have to present them as being totally wrong and almost evil and with no redeeming social value? Or can we say, it's got certain things going for it, but it doesn't happen to be where I fit. So I wanted to see for you, and I'm sure that everybody has had their own religious experiences and people mischaracterizing what you believe, whether it's politically or religiously or in some other way. And, talk about what the limit or what the value, if you will, of limits might be. And I guess we'll start with Norm.
I certainly think limits have value. Something that dawned on me when you mentioned that scene, which I paid close attention to, is that in my experience, Christian evangelists frequently paint incredibly depraved stories about their earlier life before they were born again. And I've experienced this from evangelists on a one-to-one sort of basis many times, although I have to admit most of that was when I was in college because I just don't see them anymore. But with respect to finding value in philosophies other than my own, I find great value in many philosophies other than mine, not all of them.
By the way, if you're looking for the evangelists, Josh has another story about his discussion with the evangelist in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. So that's another one to add. These things, he's like a magnet. These things just, they all come upon. So, yeah. But you're right. In many ways, I was a lost soul, and I was into, all these terrible things. And then I found Jesus, and all of a sudden, right, everything was changed.
Well, and interestingly, just because, this is going to also connect us to this week's, I was about to say this week's Parsha, this week's episode, that there's also a sense of, if you were religious, needing to remain religious, or at least needing to come across as knowing about your religiosity and not straying from that path to now become secular. But to the point of, we can see the beauty in both directions, right? Knowing that from last week's episode that it's being painted as one good, one bad, that there's actually real value in both sides. It's just a matter of what you are taking on as your identity, and the topic that you and I so much discussed, which is this idea of no one's really being honest with who they are. Everyone's trying to be a little bit of something else. And so how does that play to the stereotype of secular, or in terms of like spectrum of Judaism, like less observant being that which you don't want to be, or seen as, quote, negative, as opposed to if you're following all the rules and you have more of those limits.
I'm going to trust that was Rebecca's hand, unless Leonard is a ventriloquist. Is there a word for a ventriloquist? Somebody who can throw their hand,
Yeah.
Somebody was saying that I saw something, and somebody was making a joke, right? That ventriloquists now, their act is so much easier, because they can wear the mask. And
yes, so true.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of like acceptance of different, let's call it denominations, that interestingly, and maybe this is I've seen it several times personally, but it also kind of seems maybe like a stereotype that a Baal Tshuva, which is what we're saying, the speaker is a Baal Tshuva, sometimes is more critical of other Jews who aren't Baal Tshuva, or who aren't as frum as they are. I think about my cousin who married a Baal Tshuva woman, and that ended up, she had certain notions of how to do things, and so he, who was modern Orthodox, ended up being more stringent on certain things. Or I think about being at a dinner party with some parents, and two Baal Tshuva women realizing, meeting for the first time some new parents, and they're both Baal Tshuva, and then that gave them a bond, and then they right away seemed to kind of pick at some other people, whatever. Anyway, so it's kind of interesting that somebody who you'd think who had experienced before they became religious, and who might relate more to people from various groups, they kind of might be a little more critical.
Yeah. I think we see that just in our own, people who I've known who have grown up a certain way, but then become more religious or less, right? They end up being more critical based on the kind of journey they went through, to saying, that's not real Judaism, or that's too strict, or you don't need to do that. And it's like, well, just because you've changed doesn't mean that now you know something that I don't know. You just are practicing in a different way. So I do think that we see it even within our own Judaisms, right? You see it within us, the same denomination, in terms of how people are practicing and judging others' practices. And of course, we would hope that people could just be Jewish, right? When I was a rabbi in Northern California, one of the things that we would often be asked, because in Northern California, denominations, maybe a little bit similar to Israel, you're either like pretty observant or you're not observant at all in most locations in Northern California. And so we were often asked, what denomination of shul are you? And we have conservative rabbis, but the people who went to the shul, probably if you had to put them into a box, would probably be seen as more observantly Reform Jews. And so Rabbi Corey Helfand and I used to often say, we're Jewish. That's our denomination, right? We're a shul. We're a Jewish shul. And I think that is often seen as not an adequate enough answer, because you need to fit yourself into a box. But as you're saying, Rebecca, even when we put ourselves in those boxes, there's judgments that come with the way that we've defined ourselves based on previous experience or based on the company that we're in.
Well, before I call on Michael, who had his hand up, I just want to respond to that with, I remember when Jimmy Carter was running for president, right? Some of you will remember that. And he was criticized for being so fuzzy and really not taking any position. But as we all know, once you take a position, you establish a position, it's much easier to criticize the person. So if you're kind of vague, then, it's harder to hit kind of a moving target. So, so just Karen is asking online in terms of what we're talking about, life without limits. This really had to do with the whole question of the girls really in the yeshiva, and kind of with the secular life, that they were being taught was totally evil. And of course, now, once they're taught that it's totally evil, they want to hear all about, well, where did you work? Did you ever go to a pub? Do you have a boyfriend? Did you this and that? So that's kind of where we got into it. Okay, anyhow, Michael.
When we were talking about lack of tolerance for someone at the opposite end of the observance spectrum, I just wanted to relay a brief story. Last Friday afternoon, the Rabbah at my synagogue in Montreal, which is a modern, granted a liberal modern Orthodox synagogue, but a modern Orthodox synagogue, spoke about what happened at the Kotel on Tu B'Shvat, on Tisha B'Av rather, where there was, on Tisha B'Av, with respect to the modern Orthodox, who were not Haredim, which is what really made the Rabbah upset, group that broke into the now much smaller egalitarian section and forced a division between the two of them, a mechitza between the two. There's the word I wanted. And she was furious. And this is our modern Orthodox Rabbah, our Maharat Academy Rabbah, who's very definitely Orthodox and very definitely has definite opinions about, as she said, there were real divisions and philosophical differences, Reform, Orthodox, and conservative. But she said, that notwithstanding, for one group of Jews to go after another group of Jews in such a negative way, and especially on Tisha B'Av, she was just disgusted. So I leave that as a comment in terms of tolerance.
Well, right. And obviously a lot of us know that the saying that the temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, of baseless hatred of one Jew against another. But, so this really brings up a lot of different issues about our differences. It's not only the idea of life secular versus religious, but, here we're seeing Yifat's brother, who is kind of living a double life. And he's secular 51 weeks a year, and the 1 week he comes to Israel so that, his family, that he doesn't have to get any grief from his family. He becomes dati, to them. But, it also brings up a topic that all of us are very familiar with, and that has to do with differences in, we could call it intra-faith relationships as well as inter-faith relationships. Can an Orthodox Jew marry a Reform Jew? Or can a conservative Jew, how could that work? Can a Jew marry a non-Jew and have it work out? As I think it was Yifat who had said, and it was quoted a few times in the episode, in episode 9, for a religious boy and a non-religious girl, it would never work out. And yet, I know stories of people where, something like that has worked out. And we all know that sometimes you have people from very different backgrounds who do work out better. So, it's another question. Is it better to have two similar halves or two similar pieces in a couple? Or might it work out better to have people who are more opposites? And I'm not talking, I don't want to ask you about I'm not saying, yes, we should encourage interfaith marriage. That's not what I am saying. But going back to where we started, can we at least admit that every interfaith relationship is not, evil and sinful and destructive to the Jewish people and a shanda and a da-da-da-da-da, it's, is there something in between that and the opposite?
Well, and then to add to that, in terms of what we're seeing in this experience with the brother, whose name I keep forgetting, Alicia. Okay, Alicia. We're gonna go with that. That he is also going back to the initial comment, right, about last week's episode, which we talked all about in last week's class, right, of this idea of secular bad, religious good, that he's playing into that, and that Yifat is making that known as like a family standard, right? That if you're a religious person, which she is, which she thinks her brother is, which her family is, then you have to marry within it, according to her, you have to marry within the confines of the religious society. So that's not just don't marry someone who's not Jewish, right? But that's marry someone who's Jewish just like you. And so I just wanted to add that one of the things, I have one sibling who's married, and I have a lot of other siblings. And one of the things that my grandparents say to us all the time is that they want us to marry Jewish people, but they want us to marry based on values, because ultimately you marry the family, you don't just marry the person. And that the fact that Yifat is worried that if they were to be, they've known each other for like 35 minutes and we're already talking about marriage, but okay. But the fact that she can now be tangled into a web of a family that wouldn't necessarily hold the same values, that's where she sees conflict. And that it's coming out through this religious, not religious banter and stereotype, which is a really difficult stance to take when you are just talking about a Jewish person marrying another, we think at least, good Jewish person. So I just wanted to add that into the mix to hear what people think.
Leonard or Rebecca?
Renee, just before, hold on one second, Rebecca. Renee just asked a question. If the brother already said he wasn't religious, would she? Is that supposed to be Yifat? I think so. Would Yifat have objected? It's a great question. I don't think that she would have objected if he would have said that he was secular to be with someone secular. I think that she would have objected to him being secular, but I don't think that she would have objected to the shidduch. I think that she would recognize that if they have similar goals and similar, right now she thinks that he wants to be a frum person, right? And is practicing a frum life, which isn't true. So she wants him to find a match that would be able to help him along that journey, and knows that Hodaya wouldn't be able to. So, okay, sorry, Rebecca, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay. I was just going to share one of the things that then when we were going to get married, and I think they still have it, that the AJU, American Jewish University, offers a Making Marriage Work.
Yeah.
Several weeks, 6 weeks, I forget, whatever, for couples before they get married. And as part of that course, besides lectures and things, there's a survey that you each take separately. Yeah. And then you meet with a marriage and family counselor who reviews it with you. And besides asking questions about, how you feel about money and family and all kinds of things, there's also the religious part. So interestingly, she said to us, I've never had a couple so closely aligned with the religious thing as Leonard and I, as our answers were. I think it was perhaps more about practices than belief. Yeah. But yeah. I really don't recall. But she said that, that is something that often, and it's good that they get it out, that they see, and it's part of the discussion with the counselor. And she starts them on a journey of talking about religion and observances, along with other things like money, etc. So
Sure.
It's interesting that she says, often people are different. So that's something that you have to deal with when you're going to marry somebody. Most people are different because you grow up in, at least the people who tended to come to this class, I guess, grow up differently. So
a lot of the couples, and I'm sure that Rabbi Pernick has similar stories. A lot of the couples that I work with did not grow up in the same kind of Jewish household. Maybe they didn't even grow up in a Jewish household. They definitely didn't grow up in the same exact way Jewishly. And one of the things that I actually find most intriguing about a couple is when they're teaching each other what it means to build a Jewish home. And I think as long as your values and your interests and your love for each other's family and all those things are aligned, like, who cares if you wash your hands before you eat bread and I don't yet, right? Like, maybe those things, or you rip toilet paper on Shabbat and I don't, right? Those things you can work out. Those don't make or break a relationship. But to be able to then create Judaism together, sometimes that's even more interesting, whereas you and Leonard got to build upon that which you already had in common and make that even stronger. So there was no kind of starting point. You just got to blossom from there. So I think, as the person pointed out to you, I think that's very unique and a blessing, obviously, in many ways. And to go back to what's happening in the episode, like, what a beautiful way for maybe him to come back to some of his Judaism that he might have missed out on because all of a sudden secular life looks more intriguing or whatever. Anyway, I could give like many lectures on this, but I'll stop there. Yeah, Denise.
I thought she might have had an inkling that he may not be religious, because when they were in the kitchen, she starts crying to Hodaya.
Yeah.
And she talks about how he's never been at the Seder.
Yes.
And that seemed like significant, you know what I mean? Because it's like, like, what is he doing for Lil Seder in San Francisco? And like, and that in 7 years, he never thought to come back. And then she said she's never seen his arms. He always comes in winter. And I thought, I wonder if she suspects he has tattoos or something.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. It's possible. I think you're right. I think she does have an inkling. And I think that the fact that he shows up not around holiday times at all, like Pesach, obviously being a longer and more restrictive holiday, shows to her that there's starting to be some kind of distance. And she suspects, it seems, that something is going on and that Hodaya could potentially take him even further. I don't think she suspects that he's completely off the derech, but I think that she suspects that he's moving in that direction, and Hodaya would kind of be the straw that broke the camel's back. I agree.
And I think that this relationship is the perfect reason that Reform and conservative Judaism really there's such a need for them in Israel, because most Israelis, I believe, don't want to be totally secular, and they don't want to be totally religious. They want to be able to have a certain amount of religiosity in their life, but they're not necessarily looking for the extremes, but that has not been presented to them for the most part as an option. Right. Which I also just want to say one other thing, which is that just this month, one of the most, I hope nobody here is connected with it, but one of the most boring places that people used to visit on tours to Israel has been totally and completely transformed, and that was Beit HaTfutzot, the Diaspora Museum at Tel Aviv University, which was around for a long time, and it was that's how the paper. Okay, so we went, and the first thing we see is 21 life-size digital panels of people telling their story, and including Bill Hess, whom some of you know, and Rabbi Schatz, who was the rabbi in LA who was on there?
Rabbi Sharon Brous.
Right. So her story is up there. She's telling her story. And it's about there are different ways to be Jewish. And they're not talking about Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. And it was the whole place. I told Rabbi Schatz before, the guide told us, the old museum was oi. We're Jews, oi, look at what we've gone through. This is hallelujah. Literally, they have this whole thing about Leonard Cohen. I mean, it's just like the joy of being Jewish, from Seinfeld to entertainment to the arts to you actually literally prepare recipes. You have to chop things. You have to put them in the pan. I mean, it's a fabulous, fabulous place. So the old Beit HaTfutzot, which I used to tell people don't go. It's unless you really are really challenged for something to do. This place is great, but
unless it's raining.
Yeah,
and then you need a place to go.
Right, very good air conditioning too. But the idea is that there are so many different ways to be Jewish, and we tend to say there's one, or a lot of Jews tend to say there's one, and that's not true. And we know that's not true, and it's never been true. So I think the diversity makes us stronger, just like, anybody here familiar with the JNF forests and how they plant them? Do we have any, when I was I think in a high school, and we had to take this vocational test, and you fill out all these things, and I think I got the highest score for being a forest ranger. Never understood that. But, when they plant the forests, and then we'll go to Norm, they don't just plant one type of tree, because if there's a disease, it wipes out the whole thing. So there's diversity in the forests that they plant to strengthen the forest. Norm.
Wow, I did not know that. I love that.
Is it done anything like what was in the movie? Kuni Lemel, I think was called.
Oh, Kuni Lemel.
That
wow.
You and I would remember, but most of the people might not.
I saw a Kuni Lemel movie in Israel. It had to be 1972. And I honestly confess, I don't remember too much about it.
They had this guy who was working for the JNF, and American.
No, you're thinking
up in a limousine, and they would see the sign identifying the forest, and they would put photographs and drive off. He would pull out the sign and put in a new sign, and the next couple would come with their driver, and they would get the picture. It was very, very funny.
That was actually one of the first Israeli movies, and I think that was Topol, if I'm right. But it was called Salach Shabbati.
Yeah.
Or Salach.
Yeah, I think you're right. I had the wrong name.
Exactly. This plant, the Green Family Forest. They take the sign and the picture, and then they leave in their car, and they take out the sign and get it ready for the next family. Great scene, which was very, critical of Israeli society. But the point, though, is really important. There's a holiday. I'm going to leave it to you. You tell me, what's the holiday where our ritual symbols talk about the diversity of Jews and how, when we're together, we're stronger?
Sukkos.
Exactly. The different elements of the lulav. Exactly. Lem and/or Rebecca. Can we just call you Lecca or Rebecca? I don't know.
Rebecca's a hard name to do that with. I speak from experience.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I got to get my 2 cents worth in here. One story I heard about the JNF forest, because people go and they plant trees, is that the volunteers who go and do that don't do a very good job on average. So after the people leave, then they have the workers come in and do it right.
Yes.
Or they move them to some other place.
Yeah.
I have heard those stories. Yes.
I wanted to say that I think that's one of the beauties of Chabad. Chabad welcomes everybody and knows that you do not observe as they observe, that you can drive to their home for a Shabbat dinner, and that some women wear pants and so on, and they never criticize, and they're very open and accepting. And I think that's what makes them so attractive.
Yeah. You've all heard me talk about this quite a bit, because typically the Rabbi Pernick that we have is of the Josh variety. But when we were in rabbinical school and we did this fellowship through APAC, one of the best parts of that fellowship was the fact that we were in Israel with rabbinical students from all the different denominations. And that meant, I mean, I don't think that I would teach this class with just a random modern Orthodox rabbi, but the fact that I know Josh and I know the values that he lives by and holds by and teaches by, right? It makes it an easier partnership to be able to teach with someone who has a different denomination, but still comes from a similar background of whatever is going to be taught. I'm not going to be, blown out of the water in thinking, how can you say something like that about the Judaism that I practice? And being on a bus with people going through different places in Israel, some of which are quite contentious depending on who you are and what your Judaism is, that was a really eye-opening experience because, again, we are all one Judaism, but I love that tree analogy. If we all get to speak our Judaism and share our values and share what's powerful and meaningful to us, not only do we get to share it and kind of air it out to the world, but the other people listening get to learn from it and strengthen their own Judaism. And I think that's such a gift that I was given by being part of this fellowship. And I think Rabbi Pernick would say similarly that there was nothing like that as an opportunity while we were in school to be able to have access to Torah and learning and davening. I mean, I'll never forget, we were, I don't know, in the middle of somewhere, and the men on the bus wanted to make sure that they got to daven mincha. And all the men, including the rabbinical students from the Reform schools and the conservative schools, got off the bus, and all the women stayed on the bus. Now, I daven with men all the time. So all the women started talking about why are we getting off the bus? Why aren't we also davening? But when you're in a situation where you're not going to count towards that minyan and you're going to have to stand on the other side of, the boulder so that you're not interfering with their davening, it's easier to just stay on the bus and not do any of the davening. And you start to kind of take on things that aren't necessarily your Jewish identity because you are experiencing other people's, and for better and for worse. And that ends up helping you also solidify what's important to you. And in relationships, that happens also. So I think this relationship would be a great one because they would both have to kind of push and pull and figure out what their Judaism really is. Any other thoughts on this or on that relationship itself, how it's, again, going from they don't know each other to all of a sudden they're, married with 4 children? Yeah, Michael.
I just wanted to add that unlike in perhaps some other instances that we've observed, I don't give any negative comments to Yifat. She certainly thought she was doing the right thing. And I think she had only positive thoughts. And I don't think there was any, and all of our characters over the year have certainly engaged in manipulative activity. But I didn't really see this as being manipulative. She was very honest to all parties concerned, straight out, I thought.
Rabbi Pernick, do you want to say anything to that?
I'm having a lot of difficulty with her. At the beginning, I didn't like Hodaya that much. Now I'm liking her more. But, with Yifat, it's like she doesn't, we know people, I've known a few, who they're not happy being happy. They're only happy when they have things that they can complain about. And, you get what you want. And now she's always got this like sourpuss, on her face. So, I don't want to comment too much on her right now, but yeah, she's not at the top of my list right now. And also for, being very manipulative in terms of her husband and his job and this and that. And it's like, she's basically got to get her husband fired or, for her sake, not for, I think he's actually very happy with what he's doing. He's not just getting croissants and coffee. He really is kind of keeping that office together. And I think he feels very needed. And so what ends up happening is she ends up getting him into this kollel. Have any of you ever studied it, learned in a kollel? I actually started a kollel. I was the first student back when, in Southfield, Michigan. And, but, so here he's going from a place where he feels valued and needed, and he gets, as his chavruta, as his study partner, this really, again, let's call him a not very likable partner who seems very bored, very judgmental. He knows more. Hi. Who do we have there?
This is Rafi.
Oh, that's Rafi. Hi, Rafi. But, one of the questions that, came up actually today, one of the Reform rabbis was, what do you do about people who are just so difficult in your life and in your congregation? Like, can you fire a temple member? Can you get, it's literally a question that somebody asked, can you just tell somebody they're not allowed to join? We don't want you this year. But, here's somebody who really seems to be bringing down everyone around him. And despite the best efforts, he's young. But, how do we deal with this? And Amir really tried. But now I think, he's kind of miserable because he's like, he's trying to do a nice thing with this kid. And finally it's like, look, if you're not happy here, you can just leave. It's, it's okay.
Well, and then Leonard or Rebecca, I also, and I mentioned this to Pernick earlier today, but I also think that he is a very good character to add to the plot line of people hiding their true identities, right? Because at the end of the episode, we see him go to this lavish home. And one of the main things that he says to Amir is, I'm tired of going to lavish Shabbat dinners. So is he trying to figure out his own Jewish identity and understand how you can do Judaism maybe a little bit more informally, or not with a, 4-course Shabbat dinner, but maybe in your pajamas around the table with some friends, which is how I always think Shabbat dinner should be done. But that's, why would you need such a lavish experience? Why not just have a meaningful, sweet Shabbat dinner with friends, which is what he thought he was getting himself into. And then it turned into something that he was not expecting. And so you see this part of his identity kind of shifting around to try to figure out what he's looking for and how he's going to fit in. Rebecca and Leonard.
So Rabbi Pernick asked if you can fire a member of the synagogue. I know in Los Angeles of at least one case where this has happened. There's a group that I think they meet at an Orthodox synagogue. It is a group of modern Orthodox Jews, and they're called the Happy Minyan.
Oh, yeah.
And I have heard that they have approached at least one person and saying, I'm sorry, you're just not happy enough for this minyan.
No way.
You'd be happier elsewhere.
I hope that that's just really good PR and not a real story, but that's very funny. Very funny.
Norm.
It's me, Rachel. I wanted to talk a little bit about the character of the Havruta, whose name I forgot. And you just talked a little bit about him living in this lavish home.
Yeah.
And how he doesn't, like you said, he was hiding his true identity. I actually felt real kinship to him when he's at this Shabbat dinner saying nobody's talking about anything that matters.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about their feelings. Nobody's talking about things they care about. Mm-hmm. They're talking about IKEA. That is so stupid. And of course, then the lamp hits him in the face. But I really liked that dimension of his character, that he was really interested in meaning somehow, in pursuing something deeper. And it was just something about his character I liked.
Well, and again, I think that's why I said the thing about pajamas around a Shabbos table. I don't think that you need beautiful candlesticks and pristine clothing and the best tablecloth to create meaning around a Shabbos table. And I think that's what he was trying to find. I think he was trying to find meaning in things that aren't on the outside or aren't what he might have read that are needed for Shabbat, but rather, how do I find that intentionality? How do I find that spirituality? How do I find that connection, that feeling on Shabbat that I've lacked with all these beautiful things that I've always had in my life, but that hasn't made Shabbat for me. That Shabbat is not created for me by this beautiful home and what I assume, though he never says this, a beautiful dinner with beautiful things. What he's, I think, searching for is meaning in the experience and in the relationships and in the conversation, which he doesn't find at a Shabbat table either, but that's what he was hoping to find, was something that was going to be deepened, not just by the stuff, but rather by the relationships and the conversation that was had.
And I want to add about, I don't understand why Amir decided to follow him to this crazy farm where he's working. I can see why he's disillusioned with this yeshiva where he's been learning, this kollel, but I don't see why he wants to follow him to this farm.
Follow him to a
Are you in the next episode? I don't remember any farm.
Oh.
I also don't remember farm.
I must have watched an extra episode by accident.
But that might, yeah, it might be the
mansion, but not a farm.
He goes out to the desert, right? To this place? Oh, sorry. I didn't want to spoil anything.
No, you didn't spoil anything. I've seen the whole show and you didn't spoil it, but I think, unless I'm misremembering, I think that's the next episode.
I think you're right.
But I did want to just tell Rabbi Schatz, of course, who remains a inspiring prophet, that so many Jews today are in fact celebrating Shabbat in their pajamas, around the table as they're watching over Zoom or streaming the service, and that is a reality. But I think the other part with this is, if it's Ariel, which Leonard and Rebecca said, that really shows the need for the diversity, because the synagogue that's right for me, where it's my niche, and I say, yes, now I'm home, this is my place, that might not be the place, for Karen. And the place that's right for Karen might not be right for Sue Ray. The place that's right for Sue Ray, might not be right for Robert, etc. So when we, look, and there's some very small Jewish communities around the country where there's one choice, and a lot of rabbinical schools, Hebrew Union College sent me for 3 years to Sandusky, Ohio, home of the best amusement park in the country, Cedar Point. But there's, one synagogue, there are 50 Jews, and that's it. Whether you're Reformed, Conservative, or Orthodox, that's the place.
Yeah.
So you don't have a choice. But in a bigger community with a lot of diversity, we really can, if we make the effort, find exactly, or at least pretty close, where we're going to feel the most comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a good thing. But how do we deal? I mean, I don't know how much time we have left, but just, I really like this idea. We Jews are a difficult people. We are called an am kashay orach, a stiff-necked people. We are the ones who always annoy everybody because we ask questions. We don't just blindly accept everything. We're very annoying people. Okay. We are. We take, it's like New Yorkers. We take pride in our ability to be annoying, right? But when we have difficult people, for Amir, he could have just said, get me somebody else. I'll learn on my own. This kid is just, but instead, he's my favorite character. So far, I really, really like him. He's trying to take him in. He's trying to befriend him. Come on, have Shabbos dinner. And, that's what we're supposed to try to do. But, it's a little different Norm's comment than the traditional explanation of the four kinds of Jews, but yeah, that's good. But I think we need to reach out beyond our comfort zone. And, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think he tried to do the right thing. And, I think one of the things that I like about this show is the reason that I like, and I suspect that a lot of people have liked Dear Abby and Ann Landers over the years, is we can learn from the problems and the situations of others that they confront. And, we learn that from the Torah and from the characters in the Tanakh as well, right? So there are very difficult people out there. And the reality is, whether you like it or not, you got to deal with them.
Well, and I think that he's about to be a dad. And I think that he's trying to figure out how to parent this kid in a certain way. And at least to me, that's how it came across, that he was trying to kind of mentor him and he's such a natural teacher, based on obviously his past employment, but also just his own personality. He's also my favorite character. And how he takes this kid under his wing, but also wanting to give him these experiences. Oh, you don't want to come for Shabbos? Just come on. Just see what it's like to be in a different place. Don't be alone. I think he's trying to really nurture him, not just through Torah, but also through the Judaism that comes from experience and holidays and rituals and the pieces that he can also show him as opposed to just teach him. I now forget what the subject was that he was teaching him that I also thought was so interesting for this episode. Does anybody remember what
It wasn't Talmud, and they made quite a point of the fact that it was not Talmud. That much I do remember.
It was Talmud, but he was going to study
it. Wasn't.
No, it was, but he was going to study a different Masechet because Ariel didn't enjoy what the topic was. But now I can't remember what the topic was. Oh man, I should have written it down. Anyway, I thought it was very interesting because it was a topic that was clearly connected to these different kinds of Judaisms and that Ariel had zero attention for. And so Amir said, well, you want to go to a different Masechet? And I was like, sure, whatever you want, kid. I'm happy to learn it. Anyway, maybe it'll come to me and I'll be able to tell you, but I thought it was an interesting topic.
I'm sorry, but I thought there was something beyond a different Masechet, that he was dealing with something totally outside Talmud, but maybe I misunderstood it. I guess I did.
Yeah, I don't think so. They mentioned Mesilat Yesharim. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, they weren't learning Mesilat Yesharim, at least from what I understood what was happening. It seemed like he was speaking in Aramaic, and so I assumed that they were reading a Sugya, because then he said, do you want to learn different Masechet? And then he said something about Mesilat Yesharim. So I think it was just three different things going on, but good that you picked up on that. Any other thoughts, comments, counter sermons?
I just wanted to say, just kind of going back to where we started, and I had mentioned this to Rabbi Schatz, I've mentioned this in sermons over the years, but I think one of the reasons that many people don't appreciate religion, all religions, is that religion tries to establish limits for people. And people want to be free. We don't want people telling us what to do and what not to do. And, but it's not only religion. We see, Yafat telling Reut what to do and telling Amir what to do and this and that and back and forth. And everybody's telling one another what to do. So I think religion in many ways is just a metaphor for everything else that we're going through. But I guess, has anybody here ever driven on the Autobahn? You have. Can you tell us what is different about the Autobahn than any other road, at least that I've ever been on?
Well, I remember going very, very fast. And
why did you go so fast, Rebecca?
What's that?
There's no speed limit.
Well, yeah, no. So, I mean, I remember going very, very fast. And I remember thinking, I'm not even sure how fast I'm going, because if something was in kilometers versus miles and what's the conversion. And so I really didn't know, but I kind of stayed with the traffic, and it was just kind of smooth and steady, but just very, very fast.
There's no speed limit, correct?
Right.
I think that's probably right.
I think that's what I've been told. I've never been on it. So, and I don't know. Look, I drive on roads all the time. The speed limit's 65, and you get these people going 100 past you. But at least you know the speed limit is 65, right?
I think it's Montana, or maybe it was Wyoming. I think it was Montana. They didn't have a speed limit for a long time. Yeah. And they said that you could drive as fast as reasonable and safe or whatever. And people were driving at all kinds of different speeds, and they started giving out tickets, and they said, how can you possibly think that 100 miles an hour is safe? So anyway, the bottom line is now they have a speed limit of 80 miles an hour in Montana.
Wow.
But yeah, I went with the flow.
Right.
It was very fast. Yeah.
And I'm just pointing out that, we want freedom, but I think to a certain degree, we appreciate having some limits. And that's what we teach. Look, in my temple, there might be less limits than in Josh's shul. There's certain things you have to do. You have to sit on this side of the mechitza. You have to do this, you have to do that. And other places, it's freer. So, and obviously we could go into masks, and that's a whole nother thing. You have to do this, or you don't have to do this. But I think what we do have to do is we have to go probably and finish this discussion. So,
Denise, is it a quick something?
No, it can wait, or it does.
Oh,
no,
let's
fine.
Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, you can have the last word.
No, I don't. No, God, no, it's fine.
Okay, you can tell me.
No, because I'll tell you what. No, I don't want to I didn't realize it was 7:15, and I don't want to sit here and make people listen to an extra thought. So no, it's all good.
Tell me tomorrow. I'll be excited to hear it.
Save it for next time.
Okay.
It's only 7:13.
That's true. It is only 7:13.
Well, it's actually 10:13, but that's
the more we talk about it, the closer it'll become.
Can I tell you just the one very strange experience that I had flying back from Israel yesterday? So we're flying back. I had a 1:30 in the afternoon flight, which actually worked out very well because we're going back in time. I watched 4 movies, but at a certain point, it was Wednesday the 28th. And I'm looking on my phone, and it's Wednesday the 28th. And I'm wondering, is the iPhone going to actually go backwards in time when I land in New York and, open up? And that's, in fact, it did. So I felt a little like Michael J. Fox.
Well, thank you, everyone, for a really interesting conversation. And next week, I think we're back to normal. Episode 10 next week with Josh Pernick, if all goes well and he catches all of the many planes. And
just one episode, Rabbi, next week?
I believe so. Just one episode. I don't really have anything else to add, but thank you, Rabbi Pernick, for being here with me. It's always a pleasure to teach with you. And Mazal Tov again on the wedding. And I will see many of you tomorrow or over Shabbat. So have a great rest of your week.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.